I'm Samantha Mitchell, 24 years old, and my own father threw me against a wall so hard I felt my bones rattle, all because I refused to cancel a life-changing job interview to drive my spoiled sister to the mall. As his rage-filled face contorted inches from mine, I realized this wasn't about a ride. This was the breaking point in a lifetime of inequality, setting off a family war that would shatter everything we knew. And I was done being the victim. Before I dive into this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever had to stand up for yourself against family. Subscribe to join our community of survivors and thrivers. Now let's get into how one refusal changed my entire life forever. I wasn't always the family black sheep. Growing up in suburban Chicago, I was actually the good daughter. Straight-A student, part-time job since 16, never missed curfew. But somewhere along the line, the dynamic in the Mitchell household twisted into something toxic, especially after Brittany, my sister, turned 13. Our family home was a modest 4-bedroom in a decent neighborhood. Dad, Richard, 52, worked as a mid-level manager at an insurance company, while Mom, Karen, 48, was an administrative assistant at the local elementary school. We weren't rich, but we weren't struggling either, at least until I started college. I'd worked my way through school with multiple jobs: barista in the morning, campus library in the afternoon, food delivery on weekends. Even with scholarships, I graduated with $42,000 in student loan debt. That marketing degree from Northwestern was supposed to be my ticket to freedom, but the post-pandemic job market had other plans. Moving back home was meant to be temporary, just 3 months to save for an apartment while job hunting. That was 8 months ago. Every night in my childhood bedroom felt like a personal failure, especially with the constant reminders from my father that I was a burden despite contributing $600 monthly toward household expenses from my retail job. Brittany, now 19, was a different story. She'd dropped out of community college after 1 semester because it wasn't her vibe and worked part-time at a boutique in the mall, mainly for the employee discount. Her paycheck went entirely to clothes, makeup, and partying with friends. No rent, no groceries, no expectations. Brittany is finding herself, Dad would say whenever I pointed out the double standard. The inequality was glaring. My loan payments were my problem, but Dad happily paid for Brittany's car insurance, phone bill, and even her speeding tickets. When the refrigerator broke last month, I contributed $300 toward the replacement, while Brittany bought herself new AirPods the same week without contributing a dime. My breaking point had been building for months. Brittany had an uncanny ability to need rides precisely when I had important plans. My final interview with Carlson Marketing had been rescheduled twice already, once when I caught the flu, and again when the hiring manager had a family emergency. This third scheduled interview was my last chance, and the position was perfect: junior marketing strategist with healthcare benefits and actual career advancement. I'd prepared for weeks, researched the company extensively, prepared case study presentations, bought a new blazer from the clearance rack that I couldn't really afford. This job represented everything: financial independence, the ability to move out, and finally putting my degree to work. My interview outfit was laid out, my portfolio printed and organized. Nothing was going to stop me this time. The night before the interview, I overheard Mom and Dad discussing how proud they were of Brittany for keeping her mall job for 6 whole months. Dad mentioned setting aside money to help her with a car down payment. I sat silently at the kitchen table, invisible despite being physically present, knowing they'd contributed nothing to my education and had lectured me about adult responsibilities when I'd asked for help with a textbook once. That contrast was the backdrop to everything that followed. Years of swallowing unfairness, of hearing Samantha is strong, she doesn't need help, while watching Brittany receive endless support. I wasn't just fighting for a job interview. I was fighting for recognition that my goals mattered too. The morning of my interview started with anxious optimism. I woke up early, took extra care with my appearance, and practiced my elevator pitch while applying minimal makeup, professional but not overdone. My interview was scheduled for 1:30 p.m., requiring a 45-minute drive to downtown Chicago, so I planned to leave by noon to allow for traffic and parking. At 11:15 a.m., just as I was putting the finishing touches on my presentation notes, Brittany barged into my room without knocking. She was still in her pajamas, scrolling through her phone. "I need you to drive me to Oakbrook Mall at noon," she announced, not even looking up. "Chelsea and Madison are meeting me there, and there's a flash sale at Sephora." I stared at her in disbelief. "I can't. I have my job interview today. You know, the one I've been talking about for weeks." She finally glanced up, rolling her eyes. "Just reschedule it. This sale is today only, and I need new highlighter." "No," I said firmly, turning back to my notes. "Take an Uber or ask Mom." Brittany's face darkened. "Mom has her book club, and am not wasting money on an Uber when you have a perfectly good car. Don't be selfish." Selfish? This interview could change my entire career. "Your makeup can wait." What happened next followed the familiar Mitchell family pattern. Brittany stormed out, and minutes later, my mother appeared at my door with that placating expression I'd grown to resent. "Sammy, honey, can't you help your sister just this once? You know how important social connections are for her." "Mom, this is my third attempt at this interview. I cannot reschedule again. They'll just hire someone else." Mom sighed that martyred sigh. "Well, I guess Brittany will just have to miss her outing. I hope she'll be okay alone all day. You know how her anxiety gets. The guilt trip might have worked a year ago, but not today." I returned to my preparation, hands slightly shaking from the confrontation. 10 minutes later, heavy footsteps approached. "Dad." He filled my doorway, arms crossed. "What's this about you refusing to help your sister?" "Dad, I have a critical job interview, one that could get me out of your house, which you remind me daily is what you want." His face reddened. "Don't get smart with me. Family helps family. You and your fancy degree think you're too good to help your sister now. That's not fair, and you know it. I drive her everywhere, all the time, just not today. You live under my roof. You follow my rules," he said, voice dangerously low. "And I'm telling you to drive your sister to meet her friends." I stood up then, gathering my courage. "No, not today. This interview is non-negotiable." The next moments happened so fast. Dad stepped forward, grabbed my shoulders, and before I could react, shoved me backward with unexpected force. My body slammed against the wall, picture frames rattling, a sharp pain shooting through my shoulder blade where it connected with the corner of my bookshelf. "Richard." My mother's shocked voice came from the hallway. The room went silent except for my ragged breathing. Dad looked momentarily stunned by his own actions, then his expression hardened again. "You'll do as you're told in this house," he growled, turning to leave. I slid down the wall, legs suddenly weak, shoulder throbbing. Mom stood frozen in the doorway, eyes wide, then hurried after Dad without checking if I was okay. From down the hall came Brittany's voice. "So is she driving me or what?" I sat there, trembling, as the reality of what had happened sank in. My own father had physically assaulted me for refusing to miss a job interview. The betrayal cut deeper than the physical pain. 24 years of being the responsible one, the understanding one, had led to this moment of being thrown against a wall like I was nothing. Mrs. Peterson, our elderly neighbor, appeared at my open doorway minutes later, concern etched on her face. "Samantha?" I heard a commotion. "Are you all right, dear?" I quickly wiped away tears I hadn't realized were falling. "I'm fine, Mrs. Peterson. Just a family disagreement." "That sounded like more than a disagreement," she said quietly, eyeing the red mark forming on my arm. "I appreciate your concern. I really do." I stood carefully, wincing at the pain. "But I have an important interview to get to." After she reluctantly left, I examined my reflection in the mirror. A small cut had formed near my eyebrow where my head had hit the wall, and my shoulder was already bruising. I covered the cut with concealer, changed into my interview clothes with trembling hands, and gathered my portfolio. As I walked through the living room, my family sat watching TV as if nothing had happened. Dad didn't look up. Mom gave me a weak smile that communicated nothing but cowardice. Brittany smirked, having gotten her way again. Dad would be driving her now. Good luck with your little interview, she called mockingly as I opened the front door. I didn't respond. Something had broken inside me. Not my spirit, but the chains of obligation that had kept me bound to their dysfunction. I got into my car, hands still shaking, and drove away from the house with a single thought crystallizing. This was the last time they would ever hurt me. The 20-minute drive to the Carlson marketing headquarters became my crash course in compartmentalization. By sheer force of will, I pushed down the morning's trauma, applying concealer at red lights to hide evidence of tears, repeatedly touching up the cut near my eyebrow. My shoulder throbbed with each movement, a persistent reminder of what I was driving away from. The Carlson building stood impressively against the Chicago skyline, all glass and steel and promise. I arrived 30 minutes early, using the time in the parking garage to collect myself. "Get it together, Samantha," I whispered to my reflection in the rearview mirror. "This is your future. Don't let them take this too." Walking into the reception area, I felt like an imposter in my clearance rack blazer, carrying secrets of family violence beneath my professional smile. The receptionist directed me to a waiting area where I silently rehearsed my opening lines, trying to ignore how my body ached. "Miss Mitchell." A woman in a crisp navy suit extended her hand. "I'm Diane Reynolds, Senior Marketing Director. We're ready for you." The interview panel consisted of 3 people. Diane, a man named Marcus from the creative department, and Taylor, the HR representative. For 90 minutes, I became someone else, confident, articulate, unburdened. I presented my portfolio, analyzed their current campaigns, and proposed strategic improvements. When Marcus asked about overcoming obstacles, I nearly laughed at the irony. "I believe challenges reveal our true capabilities," I answered, feeling the tender spot on my shoulder. When faced with opposition, I become even more determined to succeed. I left the interview with cautious optimism, and Diane's comment that they were very impressed ringing in my ears. The professional mask I'd maintained crumbled the moment I sat in my car, emotions flooding back like a broken dam. I sobbed until my makeup streamed down my face, part relief at completing the interview, part delayed shock from my father's violence. Driving back to what no longer felt like home, I considered my options. Apartment rental required first and last month's rent plus security deposit, money I didn't have. Friends from college had scattered across the country for jobs. My support system felt non-existent. The house was quiet when I returned, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the living room. I hoped to slip upstairs unnoticed, but Mom appeared from the kitchen, wringing her hands in that passive way of hers. "How was the interview?" she asked, as if the morning's events hadn't happened. "Fine," I answered curtly, moving toward the stairs. "Samantha." She reached for my arm, but I flinched away. "About what happened earlier. Your father was just stressed about work. You know he didn't mean to." The justification ignited fresh anger within me. "He threw me against a wall, Mom. He physically assaulted me for refusing to miss a job interview." "Don't be so dramatic," she sighed. "It wasn't that bad. And you know how you can provoke him with your attitude." The victim blaming knocked the wind from me more effectively than hitting the wall had. This woman who had given birth to me, who should protect me, was rationalizing violence against her own daughter. "Where's Dad now?" I asked flatly. "He took Brittany shopping. They'll be back for dinner." Of course they would. I nodded and continued upstairs, locking my bedroom door behind me. My phone buzzed with a text from Rachel, my closest friend from college, who had stayed in Chicago after graduation. "How did the interview go?" "Drinks to celebrate." Instead of responding immediately, I went to the bathroom and carefully removed my blazer, wincing at the purple-blue bruise blooming across my shoulder blade. I took photos of it from multiple angles, then the small cut near my eyebrow. Evidence. Something inside me knew I would need it, Rachel called when I didn't respond to her text. Without planning to, I found myself telling her everything. "Jesus, Sam," she breathed when I finished. "You can't stay there. Come to my place tonight. I can't just leave, I said, though I wasn't sure why not. Yes, you can. He assaulted you. This is not normal family conflict. That night at dinner, the Mitchell family gaslighting reached Olympic levels. Dad acted jovial, complimenting Mom's meatloaf. Brittany chattered about her shopping spree, showing off the makeup shed bought, well over $200 worth. No one mentioned the morning's violence. When I remained quiet, Dad finally acknowledged me with forced cheerfulness. So, kiddo, how was the big interview? As if he hadn't tried to prevent me from attending it. As if he hadn't put his hands on me in anger. They'd like to schedule a final round. I lied, unwilling to share my actual hope for the position. Well, don't get your hopes up too high, he responded. Entry-level jobs are competitive these days. Brittany smirked. Maybe you could work at Sephora with me if it doesn't work out, though you'd need to learn about makeup first. I excused myself early, retreating to my room where I started making quiet preparations. I created a new email account, began researching domestic violence resources, and opened a separate bank account at a different bank, transferring small amounts from my checking account that my parents had access to for emergencies. Later that night, I heard a soft knock. Mom entered with a peace offering, a cup of tea and some ibuprofen. For your shoulder, she whispered. I saw the bruise when you were changing. For a moment, I thought she was finally acknowledging the gravity of what had happened. You need to be careful around your father when he's stressed, she continued, dashing my hope. And maybe apologize tomorrow. You know how he hates conflict in his house. As she left, I realized with perfect clarity, this wasn't a one-time incident. This was a family system that would sacrifice me repeatedly to maintain its dysfunction. And I was the only one who could break the cycle. I texted Rachel back, "I'll take that drink tomorrow, and maybe crash on your couch for a few days." It wasn't a complete plan, but it was a start. Something had fundamentally changed. For the first time, I was choosing myself. The next few days revealed how quickly emotional abuse could escalate once ID challenged the family hierarchy. The morning after the wall incident, Dad acted as if nothing had happened, but his eyes tracked my movements with new wariness. I maintained a quiet, watchful presence, speaking only when necessary, which irritated him more than any confrontation could have. "What's with the silent treatment?" he demanded over breakfast. "If you've got something to say it to my face." I met his gaze steadily. "I have nothing to say to someone who thinks it's acceptable to throw their adult daughter against a wall." The table went silent. Mom busied herself wiping already clean counters. Brittany suddenly needed to check her phone. Dad's face darkened. "If you can't be respectful in this house, maybe it's time you found your own place. I'm not supporting ungrateful attitudes under my roof." The irony of his statement, threatening the very independence I desperately wanted, wasn't lost on me. "I'm working on it," I replied calmly. Later that afternoon, I received a promising email from Carlson Marketing requesting a final interview the following week. I kept this information to myself, sensing that any good news would somehow be weaponized against me. That evening, Brittany cornered me in the hallway, her expression uncharacteristically serious. "Dad said you're being dramatic about yesterday. Were you really hurt?" For a moment, I considered showing her the bruise, now darkened to a deep purple with yellowish edges. Instead, I simply said, "Yes, I was." She shrugged. "Well, you should know better than to make him mad. Anyway, I need $20 for gas." "No," I replied, the new boundary feeling foreign but necessary on my tongue. Her eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean, no?" "I mean no. I'm not giving you money anymore." Brittany's face contorted with rage. "You're such a bitch lately," I'm telling Dad. True to her word, she immediately ran to our father, who confronted me in my bedroom minutes later. "You think you're too good to help your sister now?" he demanded. "I think Brittany is capable of earning her own gas money," I replied, keeping my desk between us. He pointed a finger at me. "While you live here, you're part of this family. And family helps family. Funny how that rule only seems to apply to me." "That's it," he snapped. You've got 1 month to find your own place. I won't have this attitude contaminating the household. I nodded, relieved that he'd given me an official timeline rather than an immediate eviction. That works for me. His eyes narrowed at my lack of panic. And your car stays here when you go. That was a gift. And gifts can be taken back. This was a significant blow. The car was in his name, but had been presented as mine when I turned 18. I'd paid for maintenance, insurance, and gas for years, but legally, he could reclaim it. Fine, I managed to say, calculating bus routes to potential apartments in my mind. The next morning, I discovered the first financial attack. My bank app showed multiple withdrawals from my checking account, $2,000 gone. When I confronted my mother, her face flushed with shame but not remorse. We've had expenses because of you, she explained weakly. Your father felt it was appropriate to recover costs. What expenses? I demanded. I pay rent. I buy my own food. I even contribute to utilities, medical insurance, car expenses over the years. It all adds up. She couldn't meet my eyes. He's still your father. He has access to the account for a reason. The account had been opened when I was 16, my first job at the mall, my first steps toward independence. Dad had insisted on being a joint account holder in case of emergency. Now, I understood what constituted an emergency in the Mitchell family. My disobedience. I left immediately for the bank and opened a new account solely in my name. The remaining $1,346 was transferred, and I requested all future paychecks be redirected there. The bank representative's concerned expression told me this wasn't a normal family financial situation. Is everything okay at home? She asked gently. No. I admitted, perhaps the first time I'd said it aloud to anyone besides Rachel. But it will be. When I returned home, I found my bedroom door ajar, though I'd closed it. Inside, my laptop was open, though I'd shut it down. The distinct feeling of invasion prickled across my skin. Had they been monitoring my job search, reading my emails? The violation felt intimate and calculated. I changed all my passwords immediately and enabled two-factor authentication on everything. As I secured my digital life, I received a text from my cousin Tyler. Hey Sam, what's this about you stealing money from Uncle Richard? Aunt Karen called my mom crying about it. You okay? So the campaign had begun, painting me as the villain to extended family. I called Tyler directly, knowing texted explanations would be insufficient. They took money from me, Tyler. Dad threw me against a wall because I wouldn't cancel a job interview to drive Brittany to the mall. Tyler's shocked silence validated my experience. Are you serious? That doesn't sound like Uncle Richard. It surprised me too, I said, feeling oddly calm. But it happened. I have the bruises to prove it. After hearing the full story, Tyler offered his guest room if I needed emergency housing. The support brought unexpected tears to my eyes. That evening, I overheard my parents in heated discussion about my attitude problem. Dad's voice carried up the stairs. Maybe we should call that marketing place. Let them know what kind of person they're considering hiring. She needs to learn actions have consequences. My blood ran cold at the threat to sabotage my career prospects. I recorded the conversation on my phone, adding it to my growing evidence file. They were escalating beyond what I'd imagined possible, and I needed to accelerate my exit plan. The final confirmation that I needed to leave immediately came when I discovered my birth certificate, social security card, and passport missing from the locked box in my closet. When I demanded their return, Dad became threatening. Those documents stay with me until you straighten out your attitude. I'm still your father, and you still owe me respect. That night, I quietly packed essentials into my backpack. Identification documents could be replaced, but my freedom couldn't wait. As I carefully moved around my childhood bedroom, selecting items of true importance and leaving behind everything replaceable, I felt the weight of history pressing down. The science fair trophies, the college acceptance letters, the photos of happier times, all artifacts of a family narrative that had been carefully constructed but never truly real. I texted Rachel. Can I come tonight instead of tomorrow? Her reply was immediate. Doors open, always. The email arrived as I was sitting on Rachel's couch, wrapped in a borrowed blanket, 3 days after leaving my parents' house. We are pleased to offer you the position of Junior Marketing Strategist at Carlson Marketing, effective June 15th, it began. The salary, $58,000 plus benefits, represented freedom in numerical form. Oh my God. Rachel squealed when I showed her. This is really happening. I allowed myself a moment of pure joy, uncomplicated by family drama, before the reality of my situation returned. I had a job but no permanent place to live, no car, and minimal savings after my parents' theft. Most importantly, I had a family actively trying to sabotage my independence. We need to be strategic, said Rachel, who worked in project management and approached problems with flowcharts and timelines. First, secure what you have. Then, build what you need. Over the next few days, we created Operation Independence, Rachel's name, not mine. Step 1 was financial security. I accepted the job offer and set up direct deposit to my new account. Step 2 was documenting the abuse. I had Rachel photograph my shoulder bruise, which was now yellowing but still visible, and wrote detailed accounts of each incident while my memory was fresh. Should I file a police report? I wondered aloud. Rachel's roommate Michael, a paralegal at a family law firm, happened to overhear. Document everything first, he advised. Photos, written accounts, witness statements if possible. Without visible injuries or immediate reporting after the incident, police reports for family violence can sometimes backfire. Michael became an unexpected ally, helping me understand my legal options. What they did with your bank account is possibly criminal, he explained. And the threat to interfere with your employment could constitute harassment. I'd been staying on Rachel's couch for a week when I received a barrage of texts from my mother. Your father is ready to forgive you if you apologize. Brittany misses you, she's been crying. Don't throw away your family over one misunderstanding. Where are you staying? Are you safe? The last message almost made me laugh. Now she was concerned about my safety? I responded only to say I was safe and would be in touch when I was ready. The texts from Brittany were less conciliatory. Way to abandon your family. Mom's a mess because of you. Dad had to take blood pressure medication because of the stress you caused. I blocked her number after the last one. With Michael's guidance, I began building my case against my parents. I hadn't decided yet whether I would pursue legal action, but having the option provided comfort. We gathered bank statements showing years of my contributions to household expenses, screenshots of threatening texts, and the recording of my father discussing sabotaging my job opportunity. Meanwhile, Rachel helped me apartment hunt during lunch breaks and after work. The stark reality of Chicago's rental market meant I'd need a roommate situation until I had saved more. We found a promising lead, a 2-bedroom being vacated by a friend of Rachel's coworker in a decent neighborhood. The timing aligned perfectly with my job start date. What about your stuff? Rachel asked as we submitted the application. When will you get the rest of your things? It was a question I'd been avoiding. Most of my possessions remained at my parents' house. Clothes, books, the quilt my grandmother had made me, childhood mementos. Logistically, retrieving them would be challenging without my car. Emotionally, it meant potential confrontation. Well, need help, I decided. People they won't intimidate. We recruited Michael and his boyfriend Damon, both over 6 feet tall, plus Rachel's brother Jason, who was visiting from Milwaukee. The plan was simple. Enter while my parents were at work, take only my belongings, and leave before they returned. Brittany's work schedule at the mall was predictable. Thursdays, she always worked the closing shift. The day before Operation Retrieval again, Rachel's terminology, I received an unexpected text from a number I didn't recognize. It's Brittany. From my friend's phone since you blocked me. I need to talk to you. Not about coming back. About something else. Curiosity won over caution. I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop halfway between Rachel's apartment and the mall. I arrived early, selected a table with clear sightlines to exits, and waited nervously. Brittany appeared looking uncharacteristically subdued. Gone was the trademark smirk, replaced by dark circles under her eyes and chipped nail polish, a detail so unlike my appearance-obsessed sister that it immediately concerned me. "You look terrible," I said as she sat down. "Thanks," she replied without sarcasm. "Haven't been sleeping great." After ordering coffees, she got straight to the point. "Did Dad really throw you against a wall?" "Yes. I have the bruise photos if you want to see." She shook her head. "I believe you. Has been different since you left. Angry all the time. Controlling." She traced the rim of her cup nervously. "Yesterday he took my phone and went through all my messages because I was acting secretive." The parallel to my own experience made my stomach clench. "That's invasive. He said it's his right as my father." She looked up, confusion evident in her expression. "Is that normal, Sam?" Because it didn't feel normal. The conversation that followed revealed disturbing shifts in the household dynamic. With me gone, Brittany had become the new focus of Dad's controlling behavior. Mom remained passive, making excuses, cleaning obsessively to avoid conflict. He threatened to stop paying for my classes next semester if I keep hanging around those liberal friends, Brittany confided. "I thought you were exaggerating about how he treated you. Maybe I didn't want to see it." I felt a complicated mix of vindication and concern. "Brittany, listen to me carefully. This behavior isn't normal or healthy. It's controlling and emotionally abusive." "But he never hit me," she protested weakly. "He didn't hit me either, until he did," I pointed out. Abuse escalates. As we parted, Brittany hugged me awkwardly, a gesture so rare it momentarily stunned me. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "for not believing you, for being such a brat." "Well, talk more soon," I promised. The encounter shifted something in my perspective. It'd been seeing Brittany solely as my spoiled, entitled sister, failing to recognize that she was also a victim of our family's dysfunction, just in a different way. The golden child role came with its own invisible chains. That night, Rachel found me staring at apartment listings on my laptop. "You okay?" "I think I need a 2-bedroom," I said quietly. "Brittany might need an escape plan too." Rachel squeezed my shoulder gently. "You're a good sister, even when she wasn't." The next morning, as we prepared for Operation Retrieval, I received an email notification that had been tentatively approved for the apartment, pending final credit check. One more piece falling into place. I looked at Rachel, Michael, Damon, and Jason gathered in the living room, ready to help me reclaim my possessions and, by extension, my life. These people, some had known for years, others mere weeks, had shown me more support than my biological family ever had. "Ready?" Rachel asked, car keys in hand. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of peace. "Let's go get my stuff." The Mitchell family home looked smaller somehow as we pulled up in Rachel's Honda Civic and Michael's SUV. The pristine lawn, the carefully arranged garden gnomes, the American flag hanging precisely according to protocol, all artifacts of my father's need for superficial order masking the chaos within. "You have your key," Rachel confirmed, killing the engine. I nodded, palming the house key I hadn't yet returned. "Mom should be at work until 4:30. Dad never comes home for lunch on Thursdays. We have about 3 hours." Michael and Damon took lead positions at the front door while Jason stayed by the cars, ready to help load. Rachel stayed by my side, a constant presence of support as I unlocked the door to my childhood home, now feeling like an intruder. The house smelled the same. Mom's lavender plug-ins, Dad's coffee lingering from the morning. The familiarity hit me with unexpected force, a momentary disorientation between the comfort of home and the danger it represented. "Let's be efficient," I said, more to ground myself than to instruct the others. "Bedroom first, then important documents if we can find them." My room looked untouched, bed still made from the morning Id left, the dent in the wall where Id hid it still visible if you knew where to look. We worked quickly, Michael and Damon taking the heavier furniture items I'd pre-identified, Rachel helping me sort through clothes and personal items, Samantha Mitchell, captain of the debate team. Rachel smiled, holding up a trophy from senior year. "Taking this?" "Definitely," I replied. "I earned that one." We were nearly finished when a sound froze us all, the front door opening. My heart slammed against my rib cage as I heard my mother's voice. Samantha? Is that your friend's car outside? Rachel squeezed my hand reassuringly as we descended the stairs. Mom stood in the entryway, confusion evident on her face as she took in the group of strangers carrying boxes from her home. "What's going on?" she demanded, voice rising with alarm. "Are you moving out?" "I already moved out a week ago," I replied calmly. "I'm just collecting my belongings." Her eyes darted between the faces surrounding me, calculating the odds. "You should have called first. Your father won't like strangers in his house. These are my friends, and these are my things." I gestured to the boxes. "Well, be gone within the hour." Mom's shoulders slumped in resignation. "Let me help you, at least." I exchanged glances with Rachel, who nodded subtly. "Fine. My birth certificate and passport would be a start." Surprisingly, Mom produced them from her bedroom without argument. "I took them from your father's office," she admitted quietly. "I knew you'd need them eventually." This small act of defiance against Dad's control momentarily softened my anger toward her. As we continued working, now with Mom's awkward assistance, she attempted conversation. "Where are you staying? Do you have enough money for food?" "I'm safe," I answered, deliberately vague. "And I've accepted a marketing position. I start in 2 weeks." Pride briefly flickered across her features before guilt replaced it. "That's wonderful, Sammy. I always knew you'd." The front door slammed open with such force that a family photo fell from the wall and cracked. Dad stood in the doorway, his face contorted with rage. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, voice dangerously low. Michael stepped forward, his height advantage immediately apparent. "Samantha is collecting her personal belongings. We're nearly finished." Dad's eyes narrowed, taking in the scene, calculating his approach with witnesses present. "You think you can just walk into my house with strangers? Take whatever you want. Only what's mine," I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. "Things I bought, gifts I received. Nothing in this house is yours," he spat. "I paid for everything under this roof." Rachel moved closer to me, her presence bolstering my courage. "We have the inventory list, Mr. Mitchell. We're only taking Samantha's personal items." Dad's attention shifted to my mother. "You're letting this happen? Helping them steal from us?" Mom's face paled. "Richard, it's just her clothes, her books, things she needs. Get out," he directed at my friends. "This is family business. We're not leaving without Samantha." Michael stated firmly. The standoff might have escalated further if not for the police cruiser that pulled into the driveway. A young officer approached the open door cautiously. "Everything okay here?" "We received a call about a potential disturbance." I later learned that Jason had called 911 when he saw my father's car return unexpectedly, a contingency we'd discussed but hoped to avoid. "Officer," my father switched instantly to his public persona, voice reasonable and controlled. "Just a family misunderstanding. My daughter is moving some things." The officer looked to me for confirmation. "Ma'am, is that accurate?" "Yes," I said. "I'm collecting my belongings. We're almost done." "And these people are helping you," he verified. "They're my friends," I confirmed. The officer nodded, seemingly satisfied but remaining present. "I'll wait until you're finished, just to make sure everything stays calm." Dad's face darkened at the implication, but with an official witness, he retreated to the kitchen, Mom following anxiously behind. We finished loading my possessions in tense silence, the officer making small talk with Jason by the cars. As I carried the last box out, I paused in the doorway of my childhood home, uncertain if I would ever return. Mom appeared suddenly, pressing an envelope into my hand. "Emergency fund," she whispered. "I've been saving it for years. Don't tell your father." I hesitated, then accepted it with a nod. "Thank you. Will you call sometimes?" she asked, voice small. "When I'm ready," I answered honestly. The fallout began before Wed even returned to Rachel's apartment. My phone exploded with notifications, texts from Dad threatening legal action for theft, messages from Brittany saying he was on the warpath, and most disturbingly, An email from Carlson Marketing requesting an urgent discussion regarding your application. My stomach dropped as I opened the email. The HR representative explained they'd received a concerning call from a family member claiming I had stolen property and was mentally unstable. They weren't rescinding the offer, but wanted to clear up any misunderstandings. He actually did it, I whispered to Rachel, showing her the email. He tried to sabotage my job. This is harassment, Michael stated firmly after reading it, and it's actionable. I spent that evening drafting a professional response to Carlson, explaining the situation without oversharing personal details, and offering character references including my former professors and supervisors. I ended by thanking them for their professionalism in addressing the matter directly rather than making assumptions. The next morning brought new challenges. Rachel spotted my father's car parked across the street from her apartment building as she left for work. He followed the cars yesterday, she texted me. Don't leave the apartment. I stayed inside, windows locked, curtains drawn, jumping at every sound. Around noon, the building intercom buzzed persistently. When unanswered, my phone rang with my father's number. Then my mother's. Then numbers I didn't recognize. By evening, Rachel returned to find me huddled on the couch, lights off, hypervigilant. That's it, she declared, helping me gather essentials. You're staying with my parents for a few days. He doesn't know where they live. As we prepared to leave through the back entrance, Rachel's phone rang, her building's front desk. There's a man and woman causing a scene in the lobby, the concierge reported, claiming their daughter is being held against her will. Should we call the police? Yes, Rachel answered without hesitation. And tell them there's an active harassment situation. We watched from Rachel's window as police officers spoke with my parents in the lobby, my father's gesticulating arms, my mother's pleading expression, a familiar dynamic playing out in public now. Eventually, they were escorted from the building. The officer who came to take my statement was the same one who had responded to the house call the day before. Restraining order, he advised after hearing the full story. Based on what you've described, the physical assault, financial exploitation, workplace harassment, and now this, you have grounds. That night, safely at Rachel's parents' suburban home, I finally opened the envelope Mom had given me. Inside was $4,200 in cash and a brief note. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you. Be safe. The contradiction of her actions, enabling abuse while secretly planning for my escape, typified our complicated relationship. The temporary restraining order was granted 3 days later, barring my father from contacting me directly, coming near my residence or workplace, or using third parties to communicate. The judge set a hearing date for a permanent order, giving me time to gather additional evidence. During this period of physical separation, the emotional impact of what I'd experienced hit me fully. Nightmares of being trapped in the house, panic attacks when I heard loud male voices, constant vigilance in public spaces, all symptoms of trauma I'd been too busy surviving to process. Rachel's mother, a retired social worker, gently suggested therapy. What you've been through is complex family trauma. There's no shame in getting help processing it. I found a therapist who specialized in family abuse, attending my first session the week before starting my new job. You're showing remarkable resilience, she told me after hearing my story. But healing isn't linear. There will be hard days ahead. She was right. The hardest moment came unexpectedly, when Brittany called from a friend's phone, her voice shaking with panic. He went through my phone again. She rushed out. Found texts about meeting you. Has saying I can't go back to school unless I cut all contact with you. Says you're poisoning the family. The control tactics were escalating, just as they had with me. What do you want to do? I asked her. I don't know, she admitted. I'm scared, Sam. I don't think this is normal anymore. It's not, I confirmed gently. And whatever you decide, I'm here for you. By month's end, I'd started my new job, moved into my apartment, and began building a life defined by my choices rather than my family's dysfunction. The restraining order hearing loomed ahead, but for the first time, I felt equipped to face the challenge. One evening, as I arranged books on my new shelves, I came across my childhood copy of The Velveteen Rabbit. A note fell from its pages in my mother's handwriting. To my brave girl, may you always know how real you are. Love, Mom. I traced the faded ink, recognizing it was written years before our family dynamics turned toxic. Somewhere along the way, we'd all become broken versions of ourselves. Dad driven by control, Mom by fear, Brittany and I, shaped by their dysfunction. The buzzer rang, interrupting my reflection. It was Brittany, standing awkwardly at my door with a small suitcase. "Can I stay just for tonight?" she asked, eyes rimmed red. "I just need to figure things out." I opened the door wider. "Stay as long as you need." The Mitchell family smear campaign began methodically, as if my father had been planning it since the moment I walked out. It started with extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, receiving carefully crafted versions of events that cast me as unstable, ungrateful, possibly suffering from mental illness that made me fabricate stories. Aunt Debbie called first, her voice artificially casual. "Honey, your dad mentioned you've been having a rough time. Something about false accusations? We're all very concerned." Then Uncle Bob, "Your father says you've been stealing money and making up stories about abuse. That doesn't sound like you, Sammy." Cousin Mark texted, "Dude, what's this about you threatening your parents?" Your dad called my dad crying. The narratives varied slightly but carried the same themes. I was mentally unstable, financially exploitative, and potentially dangerous. My father, always conscious of appearances, positioned himself and my mother as concerned parents desperately trying to help their troubled daughter. I documented each contact methodically, saving voicemails, screenshots, and text messages that demonstrated the coordinated nature of the campaign. My therapist advised maintaining brief, factual responses without engaging in detailed defenses. "I'm safe and well," became my standard reply. "This is a complex family situation that I'm handling privately. I appreciate your concern, but am not comfortable discussing details at this time." Most relatives accepted this deflection, though a few persisted, particularly my father's siblings who shared his authoritarian worldview. Uncle Jim, Dad's older brother, left a particularly vicious voicemail. "You ungrateful little bitch. After everything your parents did for you, they should have thrown you out years ago." The evidence file grew thicker. My new job at Carlson Marketing should have been a sanctuary from family drama, but the campaign extended there too. 2 weeks into my position, my supervisor Diane called me into her office, expression grave. "Samantha, I've received some concerning communications regarding you." She began carefully. "Normally I wouldn't mention personal matters, but these were sent directly to our executive team." She showed me printed emails from anonymous accounts alleging I had stolen from previous employers, fabricated my resume, and was using illegal substances. The accusations were outlandish enough that Diane seemed skeptical, but company policy required investigation. "I understand if you don't want to discuss personal matters," she said, "but I need to know if these allegations might impact your work." Taking a deep breath, I opted for honesty. "These communications are from my estranged father. I have a temporary restraining order against him for harassment and previous physical abuse. I'm happy to provide documentation." Deanna's professional demeanor softened slightly. "That won't be necessary. Your work has been exemplary, and frankly, these emails seem suspicious. I'll notify HR to flag any further communications from these addresses." The workplace attempt backfired, inadvertently strengthening my professional reputation as someone who maintained composure under pressure. Still, the constant vigilance was exhausting. Each morning I checked my email with dread. Each ring of my phone triggered anxiety. Meanwhile, Brittany's temporary stay at my apartment extended as she processed her own relationship with our parents. After that first night, Shed returned home briefly to collect more belongings and inform our parents she was staying with friends while figuring out her next steps. Dad had been surprisingly agreeable, which immediately raised my suspicions. Those suspicions were confirmed when Brittany discovered a tracking app installed on her phone. He must have done it when he fixed my screen last month, she realized, horrified. He knows exactly where I've been. We immediately purchased her a new phone with a different carrier, leaving the tracked phone at a friend's house near campus to maintain the illusion. But the invasion left Brittany shaken, questioning everything she'd previously accepted as normal parental behavior. Was it always like this for you? She asked one evening as we shared takeout on my second-hand couch. Feeling like you were constantly being watched, judged. Pretty much, I confirmed. Though it got worse in college when I started questioning Dad's authority more directly. Brittany pushed rice around her plate. I thought you were exaggerating. Or being overly sensitive. That's what they always said. That's how they maintained control, I explained. By isolating me and making me doubt my own perceptions. She looked up, eyes suddenly clear with realization. They're doing the same thing to me now. All these calls about how you're manipulating me, how I need to come home where it's safe. She set down her fork decisively. I'm not going back. The support group I'd joined through my therapist's recommendation became another crucial lifeline. Meeting weekly in a community center downtown, breaking family patterns consisted of adults from various backgrounds, all working to overcome family trauma. It was there I met Michael, a different Michael from Rachel's roommate. A law student Wad escaped his own abusive father years earlier. His legal background proved invaluable as I prepared for the permanent restraining order hearing. The temporary order helps, he explained during coffee after group one day, but judges grant permanent orders based on evidence of ongoing threat. Your documentation is crucial. I showed him my evidence file, now organized chronologically with tabbed sections for physical abuse, financial exploitation, harassment, and the smear campaign. Michael reviewed it with professional detachment that belied the compassion in his eyes. This is comprehensive, he nodded approvingly. But the financial aspects need strengthening. Do you have records showing your contributions to household expenses? I'd been maintaining spreadsheets of my finances since high school, another control adaptation that now proved useful. Bank statements showed regular transfers labeled rent, utilities, and household dating back years. Perfect, Michael confirmed. And the most recent theft from your account. I hesitated. I'm not sure if I want to pursue criminal charges. Understanding your options doesn't commit you to any particular action, he assured me. Knowledge is power in these situations. The permanent restraining order hearing loomed 2 weeks away when the family campaign escalated dramatically. Rachel called one afternoon while I was at work, her voice tight with controlled panic. Someone broke into my apartment, she reported. Police are here now. They only took your old laptop and the box of photos you'd stored in my closet. My blood ran cold. The laptop contained college projects and personal writing, nothing valuable, but the photos represented irreplaceable memories. My graduation, trips with friends, evidence of a life outside my family's narrative. The police investigation yielded little, though the building's security camera captured a grainy image of someone who resembled my father entering with a copied key. Not conclusive evidence, but enough to add to my file and reinforce the restraining order petition. That weekend, Brittany received a text from our mother asking to meet privately at a cafe near campus. Against my advice, she agreed, wanting to explain her decision to stay with me. Mom seemed different, Brittany reported afterward. Scared. She kept checking over her shoulder like she was afraid of being seen. According to Brittany, Mom had alternated between pleading for her return and admitting Dad's behavior was escalating. She said he's drinking more, staying up all night on the computer. She found him looking up my class schedule online. The information was concerning but also strategically valuable. My mother, perhaps unintentionally, was providing evidence of my father's obsessive behavior. I added Brittany's account to my documentation. 3 days before the hearing, I received an email that momentarily stopped my heart. My personal email account had been compromised, the message warned, with login attempts from an unrecognized device. The location, my parents' neighborhood. The violation felt profound. That account contained personal communications, job applications, therapy notes, fragments of the independent life I was building. I immediately changed all passwords and enabled stricter security measures, but the damage to my sense of safety was done. This is actually helpful for your case, Michael pointed out when I called him in panic. It shows escalating, obsessive behavior despite the temporary order. Forward the security alert to your attorney. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. The weight of publicly confronting my family's dysfunction felt overwhelming. What if they brought extended family as character witnesses? What if the judge didn't believe me? Rachel sat with me through the anxiety, making tea and listening as I rehearsed my statement. "You're not alone in that courtroom tomorrow," she reminded me. "Well, I'll be there." And they were: Rachel, Michael from the support group, Michael and Damon from the moving day, my supervisor Diane, who had volunteered as a character witness, and unexpectedly, Mrs. Peterson, our elderly neighbor who had witnessed the aftermath of the wall incident. As we waited outside the courtroom, my phone buzzed with a text from Brittany. "I'm testifying. Dad doesn't know. Mom is bringing me separately." The final piece clicked into place. My sister, once my father's favored child and unwitting accomplice in my marginalization, had chosen truth over family loyalty. Whatever happened in that courtroom, this small victory felt profound. The family war had exacted terrible costs, but something unexpected had emerged from the destruction. Authentic relationships built on mutual respect rather than fear and control. As we filed into the courtroom, I stood straighter, no longer alone against the storm. The family court waiting area buzzed with subdued conversation, the air heavy with unspoken tragedies and broken relationships. I sat rigidly between Rachel and Michael, eyes fixed on the institutional gray carpet, mentally rehearsing the statement I'd prepared. My evidence binder sat heavily on my lap, containing months of systematic documentation, photos, financial records, text messages, witness statements, the paper trail of a family's disintegration. "Mitchell versus Mitchell," the court officer called, and a surreal wave washed over me. My name versus my father's name, the ultimate line drawn in familial sand. As we entered the courtroom, I saw them for the first time in weeks. My father in his respectable community member attire, blue blazer, khakis, subdued tie, and my mother in a conservative dress I recognized from Easter services years earlier. They sat with their attorney, a stern-looking woman with immaculate silver hair. Dad's expression was carefully neutral, though I recognized the tight jaw and slightly flared nostrils that signaled controlled rage. My mother wouldn't meet my eyes. To my surprise, Brittany wasn't seated with them. I scanned the room anxiously until I spotted her sitting alone in the back row, pale but resolute. She gave me a slight nod. The judge, a woman in her 60s with keen eyes that suggested she'd seen every family dynamic imaginable, called the hearing to order. She reviewed the temporary restraining order first, confirming that all parties understood its provisions. "This hearing will determine whether to extend these protections on a permanent basis," she explained. "I'll hear evidence from both parties before making my determination." My attorney, Jessica Reyes, had prepared me for the proceedings, but nothing could fully ready me for the experience of publicly detailing intimate family trauma. As I took the stand and swore to tell the truth, I felt simultaneously exposed and empowered. Jessica guided me methodically through the evidence, starting with the triggering incident, my father's physical assault, when I refused to cancel my job interview. I described the wall impact, the resulting injuries, the subsequent financial theft and harassment campaign. My voice remained steady, even as I noticed my father's expression darkening with each detail revealed. "Miss Mitchell," Jessica asked, "prior to this specific incident, had you experienced similar behavior from your father?" "Yes," I testified. "The control tactics were consistent throughout my life, though they escalated significantly when I began asserting independence. The physical assault was new, but the emotional and financial control were established patterns." When Jessica presented the photographs of my bruised shoulder and cut eyebrow, I heard my mother's sharp intake of breath. Perhaps she hadn't actually seen the extent of the injuries, Or perhaps the public display of evidence made the reality inescapable in a way private knowledge hadn't. Mrs. Peterson testified next, describing how Shed heard the commotion and found me visibly injured afterward. She was shaking, the elderly woman reported, trying to hide it, but I could see she was terrified. Diane from Carlson Marketing detailed the harassment attempts at my workplace, including the anonymous emails attempting to damage my professional reputation. She submitted printed copies for the record, her testimony lending corporate credibility to my claims. My father's attorney cross-examined each witness aggressively, attempting to characterize me as emotionally unstable, financially irresponsible, and manipulative. When questioning Mrs. Peterson, she suggested the elderly woman might have misinterpreted a typical family disagreement due to her age. "Young lady," Mrs. Peterson responded with surprising steel, "I've been alive for 82 years. I know the difference between a disagreement and abuse." The courtroom's energy shifted with that simple statement. Even the judge's neutral expressions softened momentarily. When my father took the stand, he presented himself as a concerned parent dealing with an unstable adult daughter who had always been overly sensitive and prone to exaggeration. He denied the physical assault. I may have guided her away from the door, but there was absolutely no violence. Claimed the bank withdrawals were recouping household expenses from an adult who wasn't paying her fair share, and characterized the workplace communications as a father's legitimate concerns about his daughter's well-being. His performance was masterful, reasonable, measured, with just the right notes of parental concern. It was the same persona that had charmed teachers at parent conferences while terrorizing our family behind closed doors. "Mr. Mitchell," my attorney began during cross-examination, "you've testified that your relationship with your daughter has always been normal and loving. I'd like to ask about text messages you sent her after she moved out." She presented the series of messages where he had called me a selfish bitch, threatened to make sure you never work in this city, and promised I would regret the day you turned against your family. With each message displayed on the courtroom screen, his carefully constructed persona cracked further. "Those were taken out of context," he insisted, color rising in his face. "Any parent would be upset. And these financial records," Jessica continued, displaying my years of household contributions alongside his unauthorized withdrawals. "Do these indicate a daughter who wasn't paying her fair share?" By the time Jessica finished, my father's controlled demeanor had given way to visible agitation. The judge had to remind him twice to address his answers to the court, not to me directly. The unexpected turning point came when Brittany was called as a witness, not by my attorney, but by the judge herself, who had noticed her separate arrival and sitting arrangement. My sister approached the stand nervously but spoke with surprising clarity. She corroborated my account of the wall incident. "I heard the thud from downstairs, and Dad came back down saying, 'Your sister needs to learn respect,' confirmed the pattern of financial inequality and controlling behavior, and described her own recent experiences that paralleled mine. When Samantha left, it got worse," she testified. "Dad put tracking software on my phone, threatened to withdraw tuition if I maintained contact with her, and regularly goes through my private communications." My father's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful little," he began before his attorney silenced him with a sharp gesture. "Too late." The outburst confirmed everything Wed'd been describing. My mother testified last, her testimony a study in contradiction. She acknowledged witnessing the physical incident but minimized its severity. She confirmed my financial contributions but suggested they were voluntary gifts. She admitted to seeing the bruises but claimed I bruise easily. The cognitive dissonance was painful to witness, a woman trying desperately to reconcile her roles as protective mother and loyal wife, failing at both in the process. During cross-examination, Jessica gently asked, "Mrs. Mitchell, did you provide your daughter with $4,200 in cash when she collected her belongings?" My mother's eyes widened in surprise. Yes. "Why did you give her that money if, as you've testified, she was financially irresponsible?" After a long pause, my mother whispered, "Because I was afraid for her." Afraid of what, specifically? The courtroom fell silent as my mother stared at her clasped hands. That Richard wouldn't stop until Head destroyed her. The admission hung in the air like shattered glass. My father's attorney attempted damage control, but the moment had landed with unmistakable impact. As the hearing concluded, the judge announced she would review all evidence before making her determination. We filed out of the courtroom in tense silence, separated by court officers to prevent confrontation. In the hallway, I found myself face to face with my mother when she emerged from using the restroom. We stood frozen, the gulf between us both physical and emotional. "I'm sorry," she said finally, the words seeming inadequate against the weight of years. "I know," I replied, because I did know. My mother was both victim and enabler, trapped in her own complex web of fear and denial. She glanced nervously down the hallway. "I should go. Hell be looking for me." "Mom," I said as she turned away. "There are resources, people who can help you too." She nodded almost imperceptibly before hurrying away, shoulders hunched as if against an invisible blow. 2 days later, the judge granted the permanent restraining order. 1 year of court-mandated protection with provisions for extension if necessary. Additionally, she ordered my father to repay the $2,000 taken from my account and recommended further investigation into potential financial exploitation. The ruling represented legal vindication, but the emotional aftermath remained complex. As we left the courthouse, Brittany walked alongside me, rather than with our parents. "What now?" she asked quietly. "Now we heal," I replied, realizing the process had already begun. That evening, as Rachel, Brittany, and I shared a celebration dinner in my apartment, my phone rang with my mother's number. I answered cautiously. "Samantha." Her voice sounded different, clearer somehow. "I've made an appointment with a counselor. For me. Just me." It was a small step, but perhaps the beginning of her own journey toward freedom. "I'm proud of you," I told her honestly. "And Brittany," she continued, Tell her I understand why she's staying with you. Tell her I'm working on becoming someone she can trust again." As I relayed the message to my sister, I watched hope cautiously bloom across her features. Our family would never be what it once pretended to be, but perhaps something healthier could eventually grow from the ashes of those illusions. The restraining order couldn't heal the wounds of betrayal, but it created the necessary space for recovery to begin. Not just for me, but potentially for all of us who had been damaged by the toxic family dynamic. That night, I added a final entry to my documentation binder, not for legal purposes, but for my own closure. Today, truth won. Tomorrow, healing begins. 6 months after the restraining order hearing, I stood in my new office at Carlson Marketing, arranging family photos on my desk. Not of my biological family, but of the chosen family that had emerged from the crisis. Rachel laughing during our weekend hiking trip, Michael and his boyfriend Damon at their engagement party, Brittany at her community college graduation. Small moments of joy captured and displayed as daily reminders of how far we'd all come. My career had flourished in the stability of freedom. The junior marketing strategist position had expanded to include leadership of a small healthcare client team, with a promised promotion on the horizon. My colleagues knew nothing of my family history, a deliberate boundary I maintained between professional and personal worlds. My apartment, once a sparse emergency landing pad, had evolved into a genuine home. Second-hand furniture gradually replaced by carefully selected pieces that reflected my own taste rather than anyone else's expectations. The second bedroom, initially Brittany's emergency shelter, was now officially hers as she completed her associate's degree and planned transfer to a 4-year university. "Hey, did Mom call you yesterday?" Brittany asked, poking her head into the living room where I was reading. Briefly, I nodded. She mentioned dinner next week. The past 6 months had brought cautious rebuilding with my mother, who had separated from my father 3 months after the hearing. Her individual therapy had led to a domestic violence support group, which eventually gave her the courage to move into a small apartment of her own. Our relationship remained carefully bounded. No unannounced visits, no financial entanglements. Topics of conversation limited to the present and future, rather than re-examining the past. "She's looking at certification programs," Brittany reported, settling beside me on the couch. "Something about medical office management." It was strange and somewhat wonderful to witness my mother's late-life reinvention, discovering her own identity apart from my father's controlling influence. At 53, she was essentially starting over. My relationship with my father remained severed. The restraining order had been extended when he violated its terms multiple times, driving past my workplace, creating fake social media accounts to monitor my activities, attempting to contact me through increasingly distant relatives. Each violation was documented, reported, and added to the legal record. The extended family had largely recalibrated their perspectives as more information became public. Some remained firmly in my father's camp, unwilling to recognize the abuse they'd tacitly enabled for years. Others reached out with awkward apologies and attempts at reconnection. I evaluated each relationship individually, establishing boundaries based on current behaviors rather than past allegiances. "Sam," Brittany interrupted my thoughts. "Do you think we'll ever be a normal family again?" The question held both hope and uncertainty. I answered carefully. "We're building something different, something healthier. Normal is relative." She nodded thoughtfully. "I just keep thinking about how I didn't see it for so long. How I was part of the problem." This was familiar territory in our conversations. Brittany's guilt over her role as the favored child, her participation in the family dynamics that had marginalized me. "You were a kid in a dysfunctional system," I reminded her. "We all played the roles we were assigned." My therapy sessions had helped me understand these dynamics. How my father had deliberately cultivated competition between his daughters. How my mother's passive enabling had been its own form of betrayal. How Brittany and I had both been damaged in different ways by the family mythology. Understanding didn't erase the hurt, but it provided context for healing. The support group continued to be a cornerstone of my recovery. From monthly meetings, I'd formed deep friendships with others navigating similar journeys of family estrangement and reconciliation. Michael, now finishing law school, had become a particular confidant, his similar background creating a shorthand understanding between us. "Family isn't always blood," he often reminded the group. "Sometimes it's who shows up when blood relatives walk away." This truth had manifested clearly in my life. Rachel's parents invited Brittany and me for holiday dinners. Michael and Damon included us in their weekend gatherings. My supervisor, Diane, had become something of a professional mentor, taking genuine interest in my development. These connections weren't replacements for family, but extensions of what family could and should be, relationships based on mutual respect and genuine care. My healing journey wasn't linear. Certain triggers could still catapult me back into anxiety: a door slamming too loudly, an unexpected financial expense, authority figures raising their voices. But the panic attacks diminished in frequency and intensity. The nightmares became rare rather than nightly. The hypervigilance slowly relaxed into normal awareness. Physical distance provided essential space for this healing. My father still lived in the family home, now alone and increasingly isolated as his controlling behavior alienated even his most loyal defenders. According to Mom, he refused therapy, medication, or any suggestion that he might need help, insisting instead that he was the victim of his ungrateful family's betrayal. In my darker moments, I wondered if he was capable of change, or if his personality was fundamentally rooted in control and dominance. My therapist gently reminded me that his journey wasn't my responsibility. The best outcome, she suggested, might be acceptance that some relationships cannot be safely maintained. This acceptance came gradually, replacing the desperate hope for reconciliation that had initially driven me. I realized that what I had really wanted wasn't my actual father, but the father I deserved, one who celebrated my accomplishments, respected my boundaries, and loved me unconditionally. Mourning the absence of that ideal parent became a necessary part of moving forward. One unexpected aspect of healing was rediscovering joy in small pleasures that family dysfunction had previously tainted. I reread favorite childhood books without the shadow of criticism. I cooked elaborate meals without anxiety about meeting impossible standards. I spent money on occasional indulgences without guilt or fear of repercussion. Brittany experienced her own version of this rediscovery, signing up for an art class she'd always been interested in but discouraged from pursuing. Dad always said art was for people who couldn't do real work, she explained, proudly showing me her first completed painting. But it makes me happy. 6 months to the day after the restraining order became permanent, I received an unexpected email from my mother. The subject line read simply, "Found these," and attached were scanned images of childhood drawings. I'd made stick figure families standing before rainbow-colored houses, carefully labeled Mommy, Daddy, me, and later baby sister after Brittany was born. The images represented a time before the dysfunction became overwhelming, when my childish perspective still saw our family as a source of safety rather than danger. I studied them with mixed emotions: sadness for what was lost, gratitude for what I'd built since. That evening, I added the scanned drawings to a journal I'd been keeping throughout the recovery process. The journal had begun as a therapeutic exercise but evolved into a personal narrative of transformation, from victim to survivor to thriver. Its pages contained raw grief, righteous anger, tentative hope, and eventually, genuine peace. The final entry I wrote that night wasn't addressed to my father, or even to my younger self, but to anyone who might find themselves trapped in similar circumstances. There is life beyond the walls of control. There is family beyond blood relation. There is strength within you that becomes visible only when tested. The journey out is terrifying and painful, and worth every difficult step. Begin with one boundary, one truth spoken aloud, one act of self-preservation. The path forms beneath your feet as you walk it. You are not alone. The words felt like both closure and opening. The closing of a chapter defined by others' actions, the opening of a future defined by my own choices. I wouldn't pretend the scars didn't exist, but they no longer dictated my identity or limited my possibilities. As I closed the journal, a text from Rachel lit up my phone. "Still on for brunch tomorrow? The whole crew is coming." I smiled, typing back an affirmative response. Tomorrow would bring good food, better conversation, and the simple pleasure of being surrounded by people who valued me exactly as I was. The wall incident had marked a breaking point, but not an ending. Rather, the painful beginning of a more authentic life. That realization was perhaps the most profound lesson of all. Sometimes what feels like destruction is actually liberation in disguise. What was the most difficult part about standing up to family pressure in your life? Have you ever had to make tough boundaries with loved ones? Share your experiences in the comments. Your story might help someone else feel less alone in their journey. And if you found this story helpful, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, you deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, especially by those who claim to love you. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength and healing in your own path forward.